Hello and welcome to our second episode of eCommerce Redneck. Today I've got something really special for you. I have got I have got Andrew Figgins from AOV Lab, and he does an incredible podcast. One of my favorites. I was actually a guest on there, and I was the second guest, and he is my second guest. So definitely really cool. I'm excited to have him on here and for y'all to meet another really great e-commerce expert. So without further ado, Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, man. As I said, you have a podcast. I am addicted to it already. I have been listening religiously on
hmm
Spotify. Really enjoy it. Have really loved the topics, the expertise that comes to the table. But tell us a little bit about what's going on. Maybe a little history about yourself. Introduce yourself if you would.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I've been working in e-commerce now for the past 7 years in a couple roles for some mid-market retailers in the Midwest. One called Rural King, which is kind of similar to Tractor Supply Company in what
Okay.
it does and its scope. And then more recently for Scrubs and Beyond, which sells medical scrubs and
Mhm.
medical supplies, was there for almost 5 years. But man, like I found it really tough working in ecom. It's tough to find tactics that worked
Mhm.
other than kind of being sold something.
Mhm.
Like it was easy to find tactics sometimes, at conferences and speaking sessions, but it was almost always like there was something being sold behind it.
Right.
Once I kind of had some time and space to think about what I wanted to do next after Scrubs, I was just thinking like wanted to provide some kind of platform, for myself and for my e-commerce peers to just provide those kind of insights and things that we would get like maybe at the conference, like
Mhm.
I don't know if I said this to you before we recorded our episode of 10 Minute Ecom, but the way I kind of look at it is like, two colleagues in line at a happy hour at the
Mhm.
conference,
Right.
because those conversations absolutely happen,
Most
and those that
valuable too. You find
oh,
out all sorts of things.
absolutely. And like everybody's just relaxed in those situations. And so my whole goal behind it was just to bring something that was, pretty informal, but at the same time could be very impactful. And have been lucky enough to have people like yourself on the show and some others that really have delivered some interesting insights, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Well, and it is it's one of those things. I feel like to some degree, ecom can be a little difficult to understand because it's not just one software. Usually, it's four or
Yeah.
five or 10 different softwares that you're using, and so getting the combination right is so important. And when I coached for the last 4 years, I was a client development executive at Big Commerce. The last 4 years I was
hmm
there for 7.5 years, and the last 4 years, they would give me clients. I would figure out this type of thing, and then I would help them execute on their particular niche. Right. And, the
hmm
number one thing I always heard that, to this day kind of cracks me up is, uh, well, we're different. And there is a level
Sure.
of truth to that, right? But there's also,
hmm
you know, certain things that regardless work well for certain types. And so understanding the ecosystem of your software, your shopping cart software, your online store is part of it, but then it's understanding what works well with that and what will work well with your business. So that's where guys like me and you
Absolutely.
come in. Very valuable, being able to help move that ball forward and figure out what actually will work for them. So, but
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
with
I've been trying to convince my boss for years how valuable I was, but anyway.
well, I it's things like, just understanding things like the average order value and how it
Sure.
plays into how people buy or the flow of the website. You had a guy on the other day, I believe he was talking about split testing. Brilliant. I
Hmm.
mean, and by the way, y'all, if you haven't been to see or listen to 10-minute eComm, it's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, right, and Google Podcasts.
Hmm.
And listen, guys, I'm telling you, if you do this 10 minutes every time he gets a new episode up there, you're going to learn a lot very quickly. These are power packed, action packed, little pieces of information that add up. And that's really how you get there. If you think about it, that's how you educate yourself,
Yeah.
just little by little.
Absolutely, man. I think that's always how I've done it, how I've looked at it, and whether it's just reading the blogs out there, listening to other podcasts, and being in those situations where whether it's at a conference or you know a couple companies get together sometimes, and you're able to share those insights. Like I feel something special about those moments that are in person. There's
Mhm.
just something different, and I think again it's because of the lack of formality to it in a lot of cases. It's
Right,
just
right,
like, okay, you're there, you're with your colleagues, you're in a situation where there's lots of colleagues around, and information's the currency of the day, and
right,
it's not just what worked, it's absolutely what didn't work too.
right.
And those are some of the most interesting conversations. You can find out a lot about compatibility of systems, like you sort of alluded to there. um, yeah, there's a lot to it. But you know and this probably won't surprise you either, I do get some pushback, from some of the folks I reach out to folks on LinkedIn, asking them, just like I asked you if you wanted to come on the podcast. But a lot of folks that are a little more, I don't want to say establishment e-com, but maybe folks that have been, CIOs or, technology leaders for a long time in some of these businesses, they don't see information as currency in the same way. They might see
Mhm.
it as very important, but they're not so willing to share it.
Right,
And I've had
right.
people like respond that way and say basically like, well, if I come on the podcast, I'm sharing like all my trade secrets, aren't I? And it's like, no, please don't. First of all, please don't come on and share all your
Yeah.
trade secrets. That's probably going to be a problem for you or for me. Um, but there are those things that just we've seen over our years that work, and those are the things that I always hold a little bit higher. And it's not just
Right.
things that I've seen work. It's from your experience with big commerce, and we have all these people that we work with that have all seen it, just like we
Mhm.
have, the good and the bad. And so I think it's always enlightening when you can kind of hear either one of those things. Really, I guess I've been focused so far on what are the good things or what are the things that have worked, but to me it's always been just as important to hear what doesn't work.
Exactly. I would say both are highly important because, honestly, uh, things will work for one client that won't work for another,
Yeah,
right? One
sure.
e-commerce store that won't work for another. And it's, it is sometimes difficult to understand that. And really, I think, both of our podcasts are really focused on kind of giving a little bit of a peek behind the curtain to help people, not necessarily giving up the whole thing, but
Yeah.
giving them that edge, that understanding, that knowledge. Knowledge is powerful, and if you really can help people to figure out how to grow their business and help them, man, it's such a great thing to watch, because if you look at the systems that are out there, if you look at how most of the companies with the economy kind of not being so great, like they're focusing only on the high end stuff, all the software companies for the most part. And look,
Hmm.
there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have a great vision, a great business plan, a great product, but it's that sometimes that knowledge level you need for entry is beyond them. And that's what I want to eliminate, and so, I
Yeah.
just reintroduced my cart consulting company. But you know, the thing is, you know, I have, you know, I spent time at Big Commerce, but I also built over 100 stores while I was there. And I also have been, you know, a e-commerce director for the last 2 years. And it's like those type of experiences really help you get some of those aha moments that you really need. And just to be honest, uh, it is very difficult sometimes to really figure out, like, hey, will this remotely work for me, right? Will this is
Right.
this really going to be any benefit? Because you know, and I'm really interested in those tools primarily too, that, you know, from the start grow with you, right? And
Hmm.
you know, if I can help people and you can help people with getting past that first step, man, you know, Kettlebell Kings is a good example, because I actually took them over, I think 2014, 2015, from a larger
Hmm.
firm. I had been in the conversation since the owner, well, one of the partners who was a good friend of mine, was trying to figure out if he wanted to sell socks or kettlebells. And you know, I mentioned that to him the other day, and he goes, "Maybe I should have done socks." You know, I'm like, "Nah, I think you killed the kettlebell thing." I mean, somebody like him who's
Yeah.
exited twice, you know, I would definitely say that that's pretty impressive. But you know,
Like exercise socks full of quarters that are like, really
right.
heavy to lift. Like,
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, the thing is, we learned so much together. You know, I did what I did
hmm.
well. And then as I got better at things, you know, I did other things for him. And you know, we helped get them in position on SEO. We helped increase their conversions. And, you know, just that whole kind of figuring out which Swiss Army knife works for you. And there's so many more tools now, you know,
Oh,
than there
it's
was,
amazing.
you know, 7 years ago, even, you know. And of course you know
Yeah.
that. But you know, I was wondering too, what are some of your maybe favorite things out there in the ecosystem of e-commerce right now?
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, I'm a nerd at heart. So I'm really drawn to, I think some of the AI based tools that
Hmm.
have come on the market. Um, I've got kind of a whole vendor network, I guess I'm calling it so far,
Hmm.
where, a few of those folks are in there. Um, but yeah, if I had to just pick one, there's a company that is based out of Florida that is kind of on their second go round of doing what they're doing,
Hmm.
called Optiversal, and they're targeting higher dollar e-commerce stores. So it's not for everyone, but I think
Right.
this is what's so neat about it is that the concept is for everyone, and you can kind
Right.
of take what they're doing and really, if you're someone with some tech backing and some ingenuity, you can kind of use their concept of what they're doing, even if you have a site that's, you know, um, not selling in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I
Right.
mean, those
Right.
those sites are kind of few and far between, of course.
Hmm.
But what they're doing is a few things with AI that's really cool, and they've been doing it for a while. But they build these AI generated pages that take all your review content and all of your product information, and they kind of mash it up together, and they're starting to see the patterns, and things like your reviews and what customers are saying about your products, and they use that to make brand new pages that people can land on, and it's just like having an entirely new organic channel almost you can create that way. So it's really cool, and I just like it from a conceptual standpoint, but also it's working. I actually saw it work back at Scrubs and Beyond when I was there, and they're working with some bigger clients like Best Buy and
Ooh, wow.
um, a bunch of other cool ones. But yeah, I would check out them, and there's companies doing that kind of thing, And again, I think that if you've got a development team looking at those products, you've got a buy versus build opportunity. That's kind of what it is. When you've got a dev team or agency that you can work with, you can decide to either acquire and buy a software off the shelf that in many cases has been proven and works well. Yotpo is another
Mhm.
one of those that I love using. I think they're just such a great company.
Yeah.
Um, or you can you can build it, depending on the complexity and what your product roadmap looks like and all that stuff. But yeah, I'll nerd out on technology all day if you let me.
Hey, dude, that's what this is about. Well, my first guest on this podcast was a company called that I'm kind of big on right now called FlareAI.co,
Hmm.
and basically, man, I love this. It was a guy that had been a store owner, and he decided that he was going to he couldn't figure out SEO. And so, he realized after studying how it all worked, and he built his own tool and it worked for him. And so now he's
Hmm.
sharing it with everyone, but it literally, manipulates the information on the site in a very accurate way, because this guy was in AI way back early, like
Yeah.
I think he might have said like 2012 to 2014, I don't remember exactly, but
Hmm.
dude, the thing that's cool about it too is what it will do is every day it will write it does all the technical stuff on your site, and even
Hmm.
submits to Google for you, directly to Google, because they're a Google partner. But
Hmm.
the beautiful thing about it will write you blogs and put the draft in your blog for you
Wow.
automatically. And then it's like,
That's pretty incredible.
yeah, yeah, right. I was blown away. I was, and these guys are local, so I got to sit down and have coffee with them. But there
Hmm.
are some really exciting things, especially around AI, that to me kind of give those guys that are just starting out, but they're serious,
Hmm.
a real opportunity to succeed. And you know, I love those kind of entrepreneurial people. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I,
Yeah.
I I get out of bed every day and try not to start another business, especially online. I was telling
Yes.
somebody the other day. I said, I love the fact that I'm in a digital space where I don't have to go out and buy a building to start a business.
Yes. Hmm.
2 years ago when I took over Pop Rack as the e-commerce director, I was a second employee, man.
Hmm.
And now we're at that place where uh, we're really about to take off, and it's been an exciting journey. But I want to
Hmm.
give I definitely don't want to discount your everyday entrepreneur, but
Absolutely.
with that said, I always felt like about at least 80% or more fell in e-commerce pretty quickly, and so
Hmm.
it's it's one of those things. Me personally, I would say, like, if you look at e-commerce as an easy way out, you probably got the wrong view of it. It can be very
Sure.
complex to make a lot of money. So with that
Hmm.
said, is there anything maybe that you foresee or have seen in e-commerce that that you would say to a entrepreneur that is just starting out? Like, what would you tell that person? How should they look at ecom, and what would your approach be if you were just starting out like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, and it came to mind when you were talking a little bit about AI there, because I was thinking about the importance of utility. You
Hmm.
know, in the program that you mentioned or the software that you mentioned, it's clear that it had or has a really awesome utility. Like you can
Hmm.
see the results. They're there for you to look at in your blog. Just to that's pretty amazing. Um, I think it's the same answer, I guess, for someone starting out in ecom is like try to find your utility and really the utility of your products that you're selling. I think there could be ways to use products that perhaps haven't been thought of in that way before, and so maybe some new markets can be opened up or some new customer groups. I know for the the scrubs market, it was interesting because so many of the designs of the scrubs became very similar to athleisure. It's almost like athleisure and scrubs merged into this new thing, but super comfortable. And so, people that didn't work, in trauma labs or, in the emergency room can wear these. I could be wearing scrub pants right now. You wouldn't know, they're very comfortable. Um, but I would just say, like, find that utility. So, and I think, I'm talking about it more from a product standpoint and, an e-commerce offering standpoint. But I think even for somebody who's in e-commerce, you got to find that utility. For me in the past, it was, I think, being sort of a glue guy or a connector between the business team and the technical team.
Hmm.
And there's lots of different roles for that or titles for that. For me, it was like technical product owner, kind of when I started out in it, or technical product manager or project manager. But over time, it kind of became like, different roles, like in product, like product innovation and that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, for me, it was just like being that sort of connector who could talk to the developers, but at the same time, you know, has the business acumen to come in and say, like, okay, let's focus on these KPIs, or let's actually make sure that there's utility in what we're doing and that we can see the progress, and that it's matching up to, what our leadership team expects us to be working on right now. But every team, every person can offer, I think, individual utility, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in merchandising. I think there's so many areas, product feed, just so many things that, make an e-commerce site tick. But I think it's up to each of us to find where our own niche is within the whole ecosystem and team. So I think I especially admire people who are starting out, because typically you're not wearing just one hat. You're
Right.
really the utility player at that point, right? Like when you're employee number 2 at the
Yeah.
ecom company, like you're probably wearing 10 hats.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool. And that's obviously a way for you to learn, have your knowledge level just go from here to here, like, super quick, which is
Hmm.
cool.
Well, and my thing is, where I've seen success the most, period, is people that ask a lot of questions and people that have great work ethic. So, be very inquisitive is how I look at it. Be as inquisitive, read a lot, read specifically about the ecosystem, that the platform that you're using. Watch every video you can get your hands on. Man, there is so much information out there. And I just think, you're right. The utility of it, like figuring out what works and how it works, make sure it works, I mean, that's why, like, when I was on your program, I talked about Lucky Orange. I'm diehard
Hmm.
Lucky Orange fan, just simply
Absolutely.
because, to me, it's a whole other level of element, is understanding the heat maps and the visual element of how people move through your store. In
Hmm.
general, they tend, different stores tend to have a little bit different customers. If it skews to the older market, well, you got to make sure it's super easy, because they're not going to be as up to date on technology. And if it's for a much younger audience, you got to make sure you've got the right social stuff going on. And, well, what tools should you be using?
Hmm.
I do always get a kick out of industrial companies that try to do a lot of, like, Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. I'm like, nobody's watching.
Sure.
Nobody watches that kind of stuff. That's social time.
Yeah.
Whereas, somebody that owns a guitar store and is selling
Hmm.
guitars, that's definitely a social product. You don't need a guitar. I do. I got 23, by the way.
I was wondering how many you had. Those look awesome, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. One of my friends, Zach, he is a guitar player for the band Live, and he
Hmm.
I was talking to him. I never knew how many guitars the guy owned. This guy obviously does it professionally, and
Hmm.
we were just talking. I said, "How many guitars do you own?" And he's like, 37. I was like, dude, at that time I had 26. I was like, man, I've got a problem, but what I always tell people is this is my therapy. That's how I
Yeah.
relax is play guitar. So, but I really
Nice.
appreciate you coming on. But before you leave, I'd love to get just maybe some final thoughts about that you can leave, and obviously plug your website and your AOV lab and the podcast.
Yeah. I think 2024 is, it's a year of advanced learning. I feel like, and speaking for myself, that's kind of like my goal for this year is really to branch out into some areas in e-commerce that I'm personally a little bit weaker at. Like, I don't bring as much utility in the area of merchandising, for example.
Mhm.
So I'm really trying to dive deep and learn more about that as a practice, just so I can kind of add it to my arsenal going forward. um, and so I think just I would encourage others to think that way too. Like, what are some extra areas that you can learn and look into this year, and maybe it's something you'll pick up from Jeremy's podcast or from my podcast. But there's a lot of areas in ecom, and if you have an interest in something like stats or analytics, that's of course there. In the product side of things and the supply chain side of things, there's just so many areas that you can focus on. So find a few and find some new ones this year. I would encourage everybody out there to look into that.
Well,
Oh, and I will. I'll take a chance to plug myself too.
oh yeah. Go
AOV,
ahead.
go to aovlab.com to find the podcast, and also it's a site that it's all about knowledge sharing. So there's some blog articles on there. You can find the podcast episodes, and if you find the business model for it, let me know, because I'm not sure what it is quite yet. I'm still working on it.
Hey, I'm still figuring it out to a degree too. The last podcast I had was just kind of a fun one, and this
Mhm.
one to me, is all about getting out there and sharing the knowledge that I have. So, well,
Absolutely.
Andrew, thank you so much. Seriously, I really appreciate it. I
Yeah.
definitely want to have you back, and I have really enjoyed our conversations before and now, and look forward to many more. Guys, Andrew is absolutely an awesome expert in e-commerce. So make sure you check him out. Make sure you listen to the podcast. Hey, in 2024, I'll tell you, go listen to 10-Minute eComm. And every time he posts one, take 10 minutes out of your day and you will learn. You will learn. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching the eCommerce Redneck Show. We're so excited to bring this to you, hopefully giving you lots of good information about e-commerce as it relates to you. If you're interested in working with me, simply go to cartconsultant.com and schedule a preliminary call for us to evaluate your needs and see how we can help you. I look forward to doing many more episodes and hopefully being a staple in your LinkedIn and YouTube feed. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Sherman County cutie with a little bit of down home. Likes her lime with a splash of so cold. If you know what I'm talking about.